Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm hoping that it has not crossed your mind as much as it has mine why a bunch of old guys from the East Coast are here to tell people in Davis about agriculture.
Hey, who you calling old?
We can't even grow hair, man. This is bad stuff. That wasn't scripted. I think I'm here because for the last 10 years, I have been herding the cats in a thing called the State of the Nation's Ecosystem effort. This was put in place by the Gore White House back in the year beyond, as an effort to say for the ecosystems we all live in, including agriculture, why is it that we can't do what they did in the economy way back, which was get agreement on a set of 5 or 6 big macro indicators of how is the economy doing. And, you know, we can debate what should be in those, but when somebody says the GNP is this or the unemployment rate is that, we argue whether it should be higher or lower. We don't have a fight immediately about the numbers or about the lack of the numbers. And we've been unable to do that in the environment area generally, with few exceptions in air, for years and years. So this was run under the auspices of the Heinz Center, nonprofit operation set to do science and evidence-based work to move forward economy and environment. Multi-sector had people from business and government and academia and so on and so on. Hundreds of folks, is that me? My time is up. Hundreds of folks involved, including a bunch from the ag sector, Pioneer Hybrid and the American Farm Bureau Federation, Doug Wheeler from California, and so on, and produced what is sitting out there, and I get no royalties from this production, the State of the Nation's Ecosystem. This was an attempt to say, what do we know about this world? And what I want to do is extract a few observations from that about ecosystems and agriculture. I do that within the context of the charge to this meeting, which was identify major trends for shaping the food system, what it can do, what it can't. My big message, except it's one that I've got to believe any farmer in this audience sort of knew from the time they were born, is that agriculture is intimately bound up in an increasingly interdependent global ecosystem. We're tied to what is going on in the forests, in the fisheries, in the coastal regions, in the urban areas. Trying to pull agriculture outside of that doesn't make sense. We can't understand where agriculture is going unless we understand where those ecosystems are going. Now, climate change, water supply, and the like surely matter. But I would argue that perhaps as a trend that matters even more for what agriculture will and won't be able to do in the coming decades is a set of other chemical linkages other than CO2 and greenhouse gases, ones in which agriculture is a source, nitrogen, hormones, and the like. One in which agriculture is clobbered by other people's chemicals, mercury, PCBs from the energy sector, you guys, embedded in a set of other organisms moving in and out of these other ecosystems, epizootics, avian flu, SARS, mad cow disease. We can't understand how ag is going to work unless we understand the systems in which these other beasts and chemicals are regulated, spewed into the environment, or pulled back out of it. So as goes the global ecosystem, so goes agriculture. So how is agriculture going? Well, the Heinz effort said we know a lot. There are things you know too. We did extent of the world, of the nation's ecosystems. Farmland is decreasing. We did inputs. As you know, land per output in agriculture is going down. Energy use per output in agriculture is going down. Fertilizer and biocides up per unit output over a generation, but relatively flat over the last 10 years nationally. We know in outputs, yields are going up. Nitrogen runoff is maybe stabilized, but stabilized at levels that are still giving us unacceptable pollution in the nation's estuaries. So it's a familiar story, not with a lot of surprises in it. What's the big surprise? Big surprise to me was the ubiquitous contamination of the nation's ecosystems by chemical and biological exotics. What I mean by contaminants, bad stuff, stuff you would like not to see on the label of the stuff you're putting in your kid's mouth. DDTs, PCBs, mercury, and the like. The best data we have on this is for streams, which act as sort of the garbage can collector of everything going on in the world around them. Doesn't pay much attention to whether it's ag land or forest land, it's whatever they ran through. So what percentage of the nation's streams would you guess have at least one of these nasty contaminants you would rather not feed your kids? People think it's less than 50%? Less than 75%? Less than 95%? It's 98% by metrics. What percent of the sediments, essentially the soils at the bottom of streams, have contaminants at levels dangerous to the aquatic organisms that live in them? More than 95%. What percentage of the streams have toxics in them at levels dangerous to humans? More than 20%. All around the country, and those are rock bottom estimates because for a lot of the contaminants, we have no idea what the safe levels are. And so on and on and on. So, okay, well that's the ecosystems. What about the food system? If you're a water bug, it's a bad deal, but we're not water bugs. Surely we know our food systems are cleaner than that. And the sad fact is we don't know that. We have not the faintest idea in terms of a national science-based data set on what of these contaminants that we know to be everywhere else in the nation's ecosystems are in fact going into your kid's mouth each time you feed them. We don't have, from the previous panel, wholesomeness was the first criteria. We have no idea how wholesome the food is we're eating. We do not know at a national scientifically reputable level the level of contaminants of heavy metals, of biocides, or of hormones in the food we're eating out there today. We do not. We do not know, we don't have reliable data on the hazards posed across the agricultural system from disease-borne organisms, trends in epizootics, we don't know. Trends in routine background bacterial contamination, we don't know. Trends in antibiotic resistant, we don't know. We have not collected reliable science-based evidence on this. There are those who find it a little surreal that we can label virtually every foodstuff we consume with a whole long list of complicated names of the good things in it, and yet despite the fact that everywhere else we look, there are bad things in it too, we can't bring ourselves to label that. Well, how could that be? It could be because science doesn't know how to measure it. No, we know how to measure it. It could be because we don't have the money to do it. Well, we spend $2 billion a year in the federal government on measuring things for food safety. We just don't measure and report the things I've just named. Well, what other explanations could there be since our chair asked us to think politics? It might be that there are some people who don't want us to know what is in the food we're stuffing into our mouths. Now, why wouldn't they want us to know? Well, you know, the obvious stuff, farmers' fears that if people read these long names that might be bad, sales will go down. That's a real justifiable fear. We've seen it every time there's a scare of this thing or the other. USDA, there are people in USDA who do some of the most superb work on toxins and contaminants of any scientist I know. But as an organization at the top, at least the USDAs we have known, they were the one federal agency that was conspicuously missing in action when we did this report. The data we have on foodstuff contamination comes from the USGS measuring fish and NOAA measuring fish. USDA was, as an organization, unwilling to show up. I think this is a bad deal for the American consumer. Perhaps more important, I think it is a conspicuously bad deal for people in the agriculture business who are trying to do a good job. We're working in a world in which the contaminants in food coming in from over our borders have been much in the headlines recently. We're in a world where we know that entrepreneurs, many of you in this room, are working very hard to achieve quality and non-contamination standards that are on the very upper tail of the distribution. And yet you've got no publicly provided reliable database against which to say, look, I'm way off scale high. That is, we have undermined the potential of providing incentives and rewards to exactly those people who a banner like this says we're interested in moving forward. The political proposition I would love to have pursued here and to hear from you, because I don't do agriculture, is the proposal to have an independent, evidence-based agency in the federal government responsible for all aspects of food safety, not this piece and that piece, not worrying where it is on the food chain. The safety of the stuff we put in our mouths and the growing we do, that's been up and down multiple times. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences has recommended it. A number of farm groups have recommended it. It would seem to me that those interested, especially from the farm production level, in sustainable food systems and so on in this country over the next decade ought to be out in the forefront of pushing for such an organization that could give us the baseline against which best actors and best performance really stands out. But that comes from Boston, so you know what to do with it.
Thank